Now, this might be a bold statement, this might get on some people's nerves, but you don't need an Arri Alexa Mini LF in order to feel good about your image. Today, we're not going to be talking about comparing the Lumix cameras to the Arri Alexa. We've already done that. This is going to be part 2 of a job that I worked with Lumix because I did have to create a couple of different scenes, light a couple of different situations in order to compare some of the S12 bodies to the Arri Alexa. Now, again, this isn't going to be a conversation about either camera. This is going to be going through some of the lighting that I did use in order to make things look good, and the fact that you can match these two up kind of gives me a little bit more confidence, or at least makes me feel better that I can't afford an Arri camera. We'll get there. All right, so we're gonna go into our first scene and how we lit this one up. And this one's actually pretty simple because it only needed one light and one expensive blanket is what I like to call them. Now, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go into my screenshots over here and I'm just gonna show you that that's the Arri Alexa Mini LF, and that is the Lumix S12. Now, these two match up pretty decently because of that new log curve upgrade, not that one. These two match up pretty decently, and if you're looking at these two close enough and I'm cutting between these two scenes, you're probably not going to notice a gigantic difference between the two. Now, for this particular scene, we do have the sun coming out of over here, so I'll just put like this. This is going to be our sun, and that's where we're going to actually play with some of the natural light on here. Now, I still wanted to light the face, give a little bit of an edge. This room itself all has white walls on it, so you can see like this light is bouncing off all over the place. It's even bouncing off a little bit here, but you can tell even by like that, which is a little mistake, because that is the end of that 2x2 diffusion that I was talking about in the previous video that you can just get from Newer. It's pretty inexpensive, and we just put it on the diffusion sheet. Now, what we did do is we did go to 5600 Kelvin. I'll leave that 5600K. And right now we are using the Newer 600 watt AC light. I made a video on this a little while ago, and that's actually giving us a little bit of our edge here. It's our key that's on this side. You could actually see it on this wall over here because we didn't necessarily flag anything off and coming to the side of the wall. It just looked like it gave you a little bit of a pattern, and that's gonna be the key light for, let me just change this up so it makes a little bit more sense. Like this side of the face. Let me just make like little like lines here. So right now, everything coming from like this line over here, going this way is coming from this key light on our subject. And then this light that's kind of giving an edge isn't even a secondary light. That's just coming from the sun. This is kind of nice because you only need one light when you have a bright window in the middle of the day, and you also have some protection from the overhead. So generally speaking, if I'm inside and there's a window, everything that's overhead on the roof over here, that's gonna not get blown out or cause raccoon eyes, which would usually come over here because there's no light source coming from this side. It's inside of a room. A long-winded way of explaining that if you have something where you're using natural light, just set your light to the balance of what's outside, and then just let that window be your rim light or your little kicker that's on the side, and then use this as your key. Now, what I did do is I did put the 600 on a softbox, and then I just put in that 2x2 diffusion, so that way it might be a little bit brighter on areas that aren't exactly on the face, but it's nice and soft on here. Now, when we get into the wide shot of things, the lighting is exactly the same. Now you can really see where that window's coming from. That's gonna give us our natural light and a little bit of a rim off of our subject right over here. We'll change this up a little bit. And then you're still gonna get some light on this end. This light is coming from that diffused 2x2 over here with the light from that 600 watt coming all the way in. We just balance these two. This one's at 5600, this one's at 5600. And that way, all we need to do is either move the light farther away from our subject for wide shots or move it closer in when you get a little bit tighter. But this one's pretty simple. You really only need one light, and then you could use your environment in order to help you out a bit. And you still get a little bit of that pattern, right? You have your light on this side, that's your light pattern. Dark on this side, there's a bunch of shadow in here. And then it starts to get a little bit lighter on this side. So you still have that light, dark light going on. That's a terrible scribble. This looks disgusting, but nonetheless, it makes the point. Now you have these two clips with each other, and this one's the Arri Alexa Mini LF, and then this one is going to be the Lumix S1R2, I believe. Still using the same profile. Lighting is going to be a little bit different, and we're going to show you how you could actually change some of your lighting up when you're changing positions. So hopefully I have some BTS, but I don't necessarily think I do. But right here, we're doing something called lighting from the window that you can't see. Our subject is directly in front of a window right on this side over here. But the fact that this gym is between two buildings, we were actually able to get an aperture 600X in to be our key light on this side. So this is where you're gonna see the light from here. Now, the problem we had with that is it was a little bit too harsh. These highlights, these parts of light would have been super, super hard, and then it would go directly to darkness because we are still working with a room. There's this nice big ceiling. We're inside of a room, so you're not gonna get any of that light coming down onto here. This would never happen unless there was a skylight onto here to kind of give you that type of top-down light. So what we needed to do is we actually, again, we used that newer 5-in-1, 4-in-1 reflector sheet. That's a 2x2. I'll make sure I put a link in the description here. I forgot last video. And we put that directly in front of here, exactly where the face of our subject is going to be. Now, that light behind it that's going to be through the window is still going to spill everywhere, and that's probably why you see a little bit of this or a little bit of that. Although it's pointing in one direction, you probably wouldn't see that. But that again is going to give you some different textures of light. Right onto here, this is where it's going to soften up on the face, so that way it doesn't look overbearing. And added to the fact that it's shooting through a window, it's not too harsh, but that 2x2 isn't actually touching anywhere here on the rest of our subject. It's a little bit on the harder side, it looks a little bit natural, and you could use things like these smaller 2x2, or even like a little 5-in-1 reflector that you can put in front of your subject or wherever you want the light to be a bit softer, where it's still a little bit harsher or just a different level on the rest of your subject and just not on the places where you don't want them to be. We also have another light coming up on here. And again, these are all 5600 watts because we're dealing with the daylight over here. And we do have another light on here. This is going to be the, yeah, I know it's dying. This is actually going to be my 300 watt light, newer made one as well. It's RGB, but we're still going with using a daylight balance. And that's where you're going to get like a little bit of light on here. It's not a lot. This light's pretty far back, but just to add, again, that little pattern that you're going to get between change over here. And we're going to use orange, where it's light on this side. It's dark over here. You get a little bit of light on here. It's dark on this side. And then obviously it's light pretty much everything on this end going over to camera right. Again, kind of disgusting scribbles, but I hope this makes sense. Now, you might be a little bit confused because you're still wondering, hey, Kofi, there's still a light behind this window. This is still a 600 watt light on daylight balance shining into here. It's creating kind of this like nice halo effect that you'll see in the hair over here, which kind of feels like it's more of a accidental backlight. But then also you have a little bit of light on this side, onto here, and then my subject is still lit up, and there's still contrast going from the left to the right of my subject's face. Now, this is going to be something that people might ask, but it's actually a lot simpler than you think. Now, that 300 watt light that we were talking about before that's creating light on this side of the face here, it's almost in the exact same spot. It's just kind of over here. Now, on the reverse, when you saw the original shot, I'm going to just put like 300. On the original shot, this was going over the shoulder. All we've just done is turned our subject around, and we use that same 2x1 or 2x2 5-in-1 reflector square. I'm not really sure what to call it, what's the right name, but it's actually going to be right here on camera left. Let me just make a little shape here. I never said these scribbles were going to be good. And that's just a bounce. Now, that newer kind of 2x2 reflector thingy, that 5-in-1, basically has a white side on it as well. And that way I could reflect the light that's still coming from the back here. There's still a 600 watt light back here that's creating that halo effect that I'm just bouncing the light off and giving return right onto my subject's face. That's why you're going to see this shines right into the face. Just pretend this is going to be a key light. Just pretend this is at like right beside me on the left. And that's going to give you all of that on here. You're going to bounce that light into here. But because it doesn't cover and we're actually slanting it a little bit, we've angled it a bit, it's going to start to fall off as it gets to this side of the face. So by the time we get over to here, it's a little bit darker because we're just not working with a gigantic bounce going on one side. And then when you put this and you place this just a little bit over to one side, you're gonna get a little bit of that as well. You have your light on one side, it gets dark on this side of the face, and then it goes light again. You're still keeping your pattern, but this is as easy as just turning your subject around, taking that 2x2, which you no longer see in front of the window here, it used to be here, and then just putting it on the other side, on your left side, so that way you could still create this dimensional look. You could still create contrast without having to move a lot of stuff. This is essentially the same lighting. Also, this is on the Arri Alexa Mini LF. Again, if you're cutting between these two clips, you probably wouldn't know. Now, this one's actually going to be a side-by-side because the other two are basically if I use one camera as an A camera and a B. But if I'm doing this side-by-side, this is what it's going to look like. This is the Arri Alexa Mini LF, and then this is the Lumix S1 II. They look eerily similar. And again, if I'm cutting between these two, there's going to be a little bit more depth and pop in the Arri, but like, most people, that's not it. Most people probably won't tell the difference. So that's still not it. I could still use either one of these two in the situation. Now, this is going to have very similar lighting to some of the other techniques we've been using. And I'm just gonna open up our little editor, or it's just Paint. We're gonna open that up and I'm gonna show you what I mean. Now, we're gonna go with this shot. This is the Alexa Mini LF, and I'm only gonna use one of these shots because the lighting's exactly the same. So there's not much to contribute when you do this the other way around. Now, I did notice that right over here, this is, well, obviously it's red. And the opposite of red, if you've ever looked at a color wheel, is going to be cyan. Now, that's where I'm gonna use one of the RGB lights onto here. And I made this little cyan rim because it's right beside that red to make that pop and to give you a little bit of color contrast. Now, that light is actually gonna be over here, and I haven't necessarily made a video about it just yet, but this is the Kanmaki Zhuan light, I think it's called the Molus RGB 100. I use that light as kind of a kicker. It's really high up on a C-stand coming down. It's right over the ring, and if you're ever lighting a boxing ring, you wanna make sure that it's over the rope. So if the top of your ropes are gonna be right here, like you probably wanna put your light somewhere over here, that high up, because then what ends up happening, and you'll see this maybe in another shot in this video, is that when it goes through the rope, sometimes it gives you a vibe, but also sometimes it just blocks the light entirely. But one of the things I wanted to do is when you're working with situations like these, when there's some prominent colors, using a little bit of color contrast, using a little bit of like complementary tones is a great way to add a little bit of pop and dimension. So that rim light is going to be onto here. Now we are going to talk about our key light, and that's going to be that big newer light that we're talking about, that 600 watt. I do use it a lot, so it was more than just me making a video on it, but that guy is gonna be over here. This one is actually on 5600, where that's just set to teal. You have to play with your RGB lights. I don't remember the exact number to get teal out of your RGB, but that's gonna be 6500 Kelvin, or 5600 Kelvin, rather. And I am still going to use, again, and this has become something that I've really, really enjoyed, is I'm still using that little newer 2x2, which I'm just gonna make it over here, which is going to make a specific spot. It's going to make just this part of the face light. And then where it starts to fall off, or where that softbox is hitting, it's a little bit harder on this side. Now, because our newer diffusion is specifically right close to the face to soften it up right on the face, everything over on these sides are going to be a little bit harder and maybe trail off a little bit, because we are still using the combination of softbox and that newer 2x2. This is going to come out to be a little bit more of a different quality than the rest of the image, even though the light is hitting it. Using that little newer thing, I'm gonna put a link there. I'm sorry, I forgot. It's gonna help you, especially when you have something on a softbox, but it might be a little bit too harsh still, especially when you're working with people's faces. Using something with just an extra level of diffusion, double diffusing your light in a particular region, especially when it's like faces, something like this, like a close-up, you don't really need a lot. That's going to be a great way to give you this effect. And then we're still doing that light, dark light again. I'm not going to scribble the crap out of it, but you have your light on this side, light all the way here. It gets dark. You get a little bit of teal on this end, and then it kind of just trails off into darkness over here with little splashes of light. These are just windows. Honestly, these are just windows in the background. If you start seeing that stuff in there, these are just little accents that help you pepper the image and gives you more dimension. If everything else behind here was just dark, it would suck. Now, this one might really bake your noodle, but these two images are the Alexa Mini LF and the Lumix S1 2E. So these could actually cut together pretty well. Again, if I'm cutting between these two guys, unless you're going to freeze frame, set them up, put them beside each other and stare at them for 20 minutes, probably not going to notice a difference. That being said, lighting is going to be exactly the same. Let's get into our wide shot and our tight. All right, so I'm going to try to be a little bit more cleanly with how I'm going to do some of these breakdowns, because I tend to scribble quite a bit and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, again, we're going to use that double diffusion again with that 2x2 frame, and it is, maybe there'll be another video about this. Maybe I'll completely talk about just this 2x2 frame and how useful it is. But we do have our newer light that's going to be over here. This is our 600 watt. Set to 5600. Our camera is set to like 5600 as well. And this is going to be right over here, and that's going to be our key light. But don't forget, we are still using that little diffusion, that little square, this guy over here. And nope, that's not what I want. This guy is going to go right over here. And that's why it's super soft on here. Like this side of the face is crazy soft. It actually looks darker than when the rest of the light is hitting. So if I want to just kind of go over to here, like if you're looking at this, if you're looking at the ropes, like this is actually brighter than how it is on the face. And this is almost even brighter than how it is on the face. Now, that's because, again, we're just using a double diffusion, but like on a very, very small area to make sure that this is going to be a lot softer than whatever the light is going to be hitting on that softbox. Now, I'm still using Cam's light onto here. In fact, this shot was before we used the RGB. And what you're going to notice onto this guy over here coming down and giving us a little bit of rim is that you also see some shadows on here as well, right? There's some shadows on here, there's some shadows on here. And this is what I was talking about earlier when having your light just above the boxing ring. This one was actually in between maybe like these two ropes over here. And the shadow from the ropes that are on here are actually creating the shadows that are on here. Now, this could be a choice variable. This could be a look that you want to go with, or maybe it's something that you don't like. But this is something where if you are going to frame through things, you're going to light through things, try to do it with a little bit of intention to create a bit of a mood. This was just kind of a happy accident. Now, in the Y shot up on here, I'm just going to kind of go to here. There is a top-down light that we turn on, and this is going to be a light that the actual gym has, and it's a gigantic square. It's a gigantic square. This guy is probably more like, I don't know, like 4,000 Kelvin, maybe even a little bit less because that lights were very, very warm. And that's going to give us actually a little bit over here. It doesn't give us too much over top. It is a little bit, like you can see a couple little flakes here, and it does get a little bit warmer as it comes down, but this light is going to be bigger. This light's going to be a lot brighter, but this does give you a little bit of patterning at the bottom. And again, we're still using these windows here. If you see all of these little windows, like here, and here, this kind of almost feels like you've used background lights because, again, if everything was dark, this whole image would feel flat and it would suck. Also, some people love this and some people don't. And somebody asked earlier if catch lights are going to be incredibly important. And if you look right over here, you look really closely, there's a couple of little catch lights where you can see where that diffusion is, that double diffusion that is helping spread out that 600 watt light. For me personally, if you can get a catch light without too much effort, especially on like run and gun shoots, power to you. If you can't, I wouldn't stress too much about it, but it does look really cool and it does add a lot to especially somebody's face. It kind of gives you like a little bit of life. And if that was dark, again, if everything was dark and there wasn't sort of a patterning between the light areas on this side, a little bit of shadow here, just something darker, doesn't have to be completely black, and then a little bit of light on this end, this whole image would suck otherwise. But there's a lot of dimension here. You could kind of feel like you could see across into the room. And speaking of seeing across into the room in bokeh and all the other stuff, these were shot on the Nisi Aureus lenses, which I'm going to probably have a review sometime this week. All right, so we're going to go into a coverage shot here, and this is also the last shot of the day. But I want to show you what I mean about having a little bit of shadow that you're shining the light through. So right now, everything below this is actually just a shadow from the rope that's directly behind our subject. We got Cam's light still over here. This guy's at 5,600 Kelvin, but that top light actually is setting a little bit of the tone, so to speak, for the rest of the room because it is a lot warmer. I'm going to just put like that 4,000 Kelvin on here. I'm pretty sure it's 4,000, maybe even a little bit lower, but it is a very, very warm light. There's no temperature on the light in the ring here. This is just a practical that's up there, and it is playing really nice with the skin. And then we do have our key light and our diffusion that's kind of off into here. So right over here, kind of on camera left, the light's exactly in the same place. We're just using the 85 millimeter to kind of compress the background so you can't see that light over here. If I was on a wider lens, you would see it and you would see that double diffuse sheet. So I'm just going to make this straight line over here. And that's going to be our newer double diffusion that's going to go onto here. And that's what's making everything on here very, 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 very soft. While at the same time, we have our 600 watt light that's on a 5,600 Kelvin. I'll just put 56 on it here. That's lighting up, and it's through a softbox, right? You don't necessarily want to make this like a hard light on a reflector through here because it's such a small area. You might get some wonky looking contrast ratios, but this is actually just lighting up the rest. So right over here, it's light. Right over here is lit up. You still have some of the top down coming down from the top, from that top light. And this is what we're looking at. So this whole thing was to kind of describe, and this whole thing was kind of showcase that one, you don't necessarily need an Arri Alexa to make your image look good, but I hope all of you already knew that. But at the same time, how to set up one lighting setup, but then just move your position around, move your camera position, move your subject, or change lenses. And you don't necessarily need a ton of lights in order to do this. That newer light is only like, I think $9.99 on Amazon US. And then Cam's light, I think, is a couple $100 as well. As far as lighting fixtures go, that's pretty affordable, and you can still get a really cool look just by moving your position and having a bunch of great lights with you. That being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this breakdown of some of the other frames from the other half of this Lumix shoot. shoot. If you guys want to see more of these videos, because I do think I'm going to do them once a week, every single Monday, which also means that, yeah, if you have any opinions on this, they're going to come out anyways. But I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.